You're surrounded by people but feel cosmically alone. Not lonely in the ordinary sense, alone in a way that feels absolute, like you're the only conscious being in a world of sleepwalkers. Carl Jung studied this exact phenomenon and made a shocking discovery. The more spiritually awakened you become, the more alone you must feel, not as punishment, but as psychological law. He called it the price of consciousness, seeing reality so clearly that you can no longer share the collective illusions that create human bonding. Today I'm revealing the 5 reasons Jung identified for why awakened people feel profoundly alone. Reasons that explain why no amount of social connection can touch this particular solitude. Because this isn't loneliness you can solve, it's the inevitable result of consciousness itself. Here's what Jung understood that nobody talks about. Spiritual awakening doesn't connect you to others. It separates you from the unconscious participation that creates normal human connection. You lose the ability to bond through shared illusions, mutual projections, and collective unconsciousness. Jung called this the burden of individuation. The more conscious you become, the less you can participate in the unconscious agreements that bind humanity together. Let's start with the most painful reason. You see what others cannot see. Jung discovered that awakened people develop what he called psychological vision, the ability to perceive layers of reality that remain invisible to those still sleeping. You don't just see people's behavior, you see their shadows, their projections, their unconscious patterns, their unlived lives. This seeing creates a devastating form of isolation, because you can't share what you see without sounding insane, and you can't unsee it to reconnect with those who remain blind. Here's what this actually means. You sit in a room and see everyone's unconscious material as clearly as their faces. The colleague consumed by their father complex, desperately seeking approval from every authority figure. The friend projecting their unlived creative life onto celebrities while dying inside. The family member repeating ancestral trauma they don't even know they're carrying. You see it all, and this seeing separates you completely from those who don't. Jung wrote, "The price of consciousness is isolation. To see what others cannot see is to be alone with that vision. The awakened person becomes a stranger in their own land, speaking a language no one else understands." One of Jung's patients described this isolation perfectly. "I can see everyone's shadows, their patterns, their unconscious games. In conversations, I see the real discussion happening beneath the surface one. The wounds talking to wounds, the egos defending, the projections flying. But I can't acknowledge what I see, so I pretend to engage with the surface while seeing the depths, and this pretense is exhausting and isolating." Jung identified specific aspects of this seeing that create isolation. You perceive the childhood wounds driving adult behaviors, making every interaction feel like watching children in adult bodies. You see the fear beneath the anger, the pain beneath the arrogance, the desperation beneath the success. You recognize the repetitive patterns people are trapped in, watching them circle the same psychological territories year after year. You witness the projections flying between people, everyone seeing their own unconscious material in others rather than actually seeing others. But here's what makes this so isolating. You can't share what you see. Tell someone you see their shadow, and they'll either attack or retreat. Point out unconscious patterns, and you become the enemy. Your vision, which could help, becomes the very thing that separates you. You're like someone with color vision in a world of people who see only in black and white, unable to share the richness you perceive. This creates what Jung called the loneliness of the seer, being alone with perceptions that can't be communicated. You become a keeper of secrets that aren't secret, a witness to truths that aren't hidden, just unseen. Every interaction requires you to pretend you don't see what you see, and this pretense creates a barrier between you and everyone else. Jung noted that this seeing often intensifies to the point where social interaction becomes almost unbearable. You're not just seeing people's unconscious material, you're feeling it, experiencing it as a tangible presence in the room. Conversations happen on multiple levels simultaneously, and you're aware of all of them, while others are aware of only one. But even this devastating isolation pales compared to what Jung discovered about meaning. Your meaning framework has separated from the collective. Jung's second insight cuts deeper. Awakened individuals don't just see differently, they exist in an entirely different framework of meaning. While others find meaning in collective values, success, recognition, accumulation, you've transcended to what Jung called individual meaning. But individual meaning can't be shared through collective channels, leaving you meaningfully alone even when physically surrounded. Here's what happens. Before awakening, you shared society's meaning framework. Career advancement meant progress. Social approval meant worth. Material accumulation meant security. These weren't personal meanings. They were collective agreements about what matters. But awakening shatters these agreements. You see through them to their emptiness, and in seeing through them, you exit the shared meaning system that connects most people. Jung wrote, "The individuated person has left the collective meaning system and created their own. But meaning created individually cannot be communicated collectively. It's like trying to explain color to those who've never seen. The words exist, but the experience doesn't translate." One of Jung's analysans described this meaning isolation. My friends get excited about promotions, new cars, social media followers. I see them finding genuine meaning in these things, and I remember when I did too. But now these things feel like children's games to me. Not inferior, just operating in a completely different meaning framework. We use the same words, but live in different universes of significance. Jung identified how this meaning separation manifests. Conversations become impossible because you're not discussing the same reality. When others talk about success, they mean external achievement. You mean internal alignment. When they discuss happiness, they mean pleasure and comfort. You mean meaning and growth. When they speak of love, they mean attachment and security. You mean conscious connection and growth. The words are identical, but the realities they point to are completely different. This creates what Jung called semantic loneliness, using the same language but speaking different tongues. You can communicate facts but not significance. You can share information but not meaning. You can exchange words but not understanding. Every conversation becomes an act of translation, and something essential is always lost in translation. But here's what's most isolating. You can't explain your meaning framework without sounding superior or insane. Try telling someone that external success is meaningless compared to individuation. Try explaining that suffering is more valuable than comfort when it serves growth. Try sharing that death is not an ending, but a transformation. These aren't ideas that can be communicated. They're realizations that must be experienced. Jung observed that awakened individuals often stop trying to communicate their meaning framework altogether. They learn to nod along with collective meanings while living from their individual meaning. This creates a double life, externally participating in collective meaning while internally living from individual meaning. And this double life is profoundly isolating. Yet there's something even more fundamental that Jung discovered about awakened isolation. Your energy field has become incompatible. Jung discovered something that sounds esoteric, but is psychologically precise. Awakened individuals vibrate at what he called a different psychological frequency than those still sleeping. This isn't metaphorical. It's an actual energetic incompatibility that makes prolonged contact with unconscious people exhausting, sometimes even painful. You're not choosing isolation. Your energy field is creating it automatically. Here's what's actually happening. Through the work of awakening, shadow integration, ego death, confrontation with the unconscious, your psychological energy has fundamentally reorganized. You no longer leak unconscious material. You don't project shadows. You've stopped participating in the energetic exchanges that maintain collective unconsciousness. This makes you energetically incompatible with those still operating from unconscious patterns. Jung wrote, "The individuated person has achieved psychological integration that creates a contained energy field. This field doesn't merge unconsciously with others' fields. The result is energetic isolation, being unable to achieve the unconscious fusion that most people experience as connection." One of Jung's patients described this energetic incompatibility. Being around unconscious people feels like being a tuning fork vibrating at a different frequency. There's a constant discord, an energetic friction. I can feel their projections hitting my field and bouncing back. Their unconscious material swirls around me but can't penetrate. We're in the same room, but different energetic dimensions. Jung identified specific ways this energetic incompatibility manifests. You feel others' unconscious material as an almost physical pressure against your energy field. Crowds become overwhelming, not from social anxiety, but from energetic overload. You need long periods of solitude to recover from even brief social interactions. You can feel the emotional and psychological weather of spaces, the accumulated unconscious material that hangs in environments like invisible smog. This incompatibility operates in both directions. Your integrated energy field disturbs others' unconscious equilibrium. Your presence makes their shadows visible, their projections obvious, their games transparent. Without trying or intending, you become a mirror that reflects what others don't want to see. This makes them unconsciously avoid you, creating isolation without anyone understanding why. Jung called this energetic autoimmunity. Your psychologically integrated field automatically rejects unconscious material, while unconscious fields automatically reject your integration. It's not personal, it's energetic physics. Like oil and water, conscious and unconscious energy fields simply don't mix. But here's what's most challenging. This energetic incompatibility can't be overcome through will or technique. You can't lower your frequency to match others without losing your integration. You can't merge unconsciously without becoming unconscious yourself. The very awakening that freed you has also energetically isolated you. If you're experiencing these forms of isolation, seeing what others can't, living from different meaning, feeling energetically incompatible, you're not antisocial or broken. You're experiencing what Jung called the inevitable loneliness of consciousness. Before we explore the final 2 reasons for awakened loneliness, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Share in the comments which form of spiritual loneliness resonates most deeply with you. Your honesty might help someone else feel less alone in their aloneness. Now, these last 2 reasons reveal why Jung believed this solitude serves a profound purpose. Your false connections have died. Jung's 4th insight is brutal. Awakening doesn't just change you. It reveals that most of your connections were never real. They were what Jung called projection relationships, bonds based on unconscious material, shared shadows, mutual illusions. When awakening withdraws these projections, the relationships built on them collapse, leaving you to face the devastating truth that you've been alone all along, just unconscious of it. Here's what Jung discovered. Before awakening, what felt like connection was often unconscious fusion. You weren't relating to others. You were projecting parts of yourself onto them and relating to the projections. Your mother complex onto older women. Your unlived potential onto admired friends. Your shadow onto enemies. These projections created the illusion of relationship, but awakening reveals there was never anyone there, just your own unconscious material reflected back. Jung wrote, "The withdrawal of projections that comes with individuation reveals a terrible truth. Most relationships were not relationships at all, but unconscious dramas played out with others as unwitting actors. When the projections are withdrawn, the emptiness they covered becomes visible." One of Jung's patients described this relationship death. "As I awakened, my relationships started dying. Not dramatically, they just emptied out. The friend I'd admired was just carrying my golden shadow. The partner I'd loved was mostly my projection of the divine feminine. The enemy I'd hated was my own rejected aspects. As I withdrew these projections and saw the actual people, I realized we had no real connection. We'd been in relationship with our projections, not each other." Jung identified how projection relationships masquerade as real connection. The intense attraction that's actually shadow projection feels like love. The deep admiration that's really unlived potential feels like friendship. The strong repulsion that's rejected aspects feels like incompatibility. But when projections are withdrawn, what felt like emotional bonds are revealed as psychological mirages. This creates what Jung called retrospective loneliness, realizing you've been alone your entire life but were too unconscious to notice. The connections you thought you had were internal dramas. The relationships you valued were psychological theaters. The bonds you relied on were imaginary threads. This isn't just present loneliness. It's the discovery that you've always been alone. But here's what's most devastating. You can't go back to projection relationships once you've seen through them. You can't reproject what's been made conscious. You can't pretend connection where you see emptiness. You're left with the choice between real relationship, which is rare and difficult, or conscious solitude. Jung noted that this death of false connections often triggers a period of complete isolation, not by choice, but by necessity. The old connections are dead, and new ones based on reality rather than projection take time to develop, if they develop at all. Many awakened individuals discover that real connection is so rare that solitude becomes their primary relationship. But Jung's final insight reveals why this aloneness might be exactly what's needed. You're becoming who you truly are. Jung's final reason for awakened loneliness is perhaps the most profound. You're alone because individuation, becoming who you truly are, can only happen in psychological solitude. The process of becoming yourself requires separation from others' expectations, projections, and influences. Jung called this the hermit phase of individuation. Not a problem to solve, but a necessary condition for psychological birth. Here's what Jung understood. Becoming yourself is impossible while maintaining constant connection with others. Every relationship pulls you toward who others need you to be. Every interaction reinforces socially constructed identity. Every connection maintains some aspect of false self. True individuation requires what Jung called psychological isolation, space empty of others' influence where your authentic self can finally emerge. Jung wrote, "The birth of the true personality requires a temporary death to the social personality. This death can only occur in solitude, away from the maintaining forces of collective expectation. Loneliness is not the problem. It's the solution to the problem of never having been truly oneself." One of Jung's most individuated patients described this necessary solitude. "I had to become completely alone to discover who I was beneath who everyone needed me to be. In solitude, with no one to perform for, project onto, or react against, I finally met myself. The loneliness was excruciating at first, then revelatory. I discovered I'd never actually been myself. I'd been a collection of responses to others. Only in total aloneness could my true self emerge." Jung identified why solitude is necessary for individuation. Without others present, the social self has no function and gradually dissolves. Projections have no screens and must be withdrawn. The persona has no audience and eventually drops. The false self has no reinforcement and slowly dies. In the emptiness left behind, the true self, what Jung called the self with capital S, can finally emerge. This emergence can't happen in company because others unconsciously resist your becoming. Your transformation threatens their stability. Your authenticity challenges their falseness. Your individuation disturbs their unconsciousness. Even well-meaning others will unconsciously try to keep you who you've been because your changing forces them to confront their own stagnation. Jung called this the necessity of the hermit, not permanent isolation, but temporary withdrawal for the purpose of becoming. Like a caterpillar entering the chrysalis, you must separate from the collective to undergo the transformation. The loneliness isn't comfortable. It's transformative pressure that forces you inward to discover what's actually there. But here's what's crucial. This aloneness is creative, not empty. In solitude, you're not alone. You're with yourself for the first time. You discover what Jung called the companionship of the self, the deep relationship with your own authentic being that can only develop in isolation from others' influence. Here's Jung's complete picture of why spiritually awakened people feel so alone. You see what others cannot see, exist in a different meaning framework, vibrate at an incompatible frequency, have lost all false connections, and are in the necessary solitude of becoming yourself. Jung wrote, "The loneliness of the individuated person is not a failure of connection, but the price of consciousness. They are alone not because they are inadequate, but because they are awake in a world that is largely asleep." This loneliness serves what Jung saw as an evolutionary function. Each person who endures conscious aloneness rather than returning to unconscious fusion advances human consciousness. Your isolation isn't personal failure, it's species development. You're alone at the growing edge of human awareness, pioneering psychological territories that others will eventually inhabit. Jung believed that awakened loneliness is temporary in the largest sense. As more individuals awaken and experience this isolation, new forms of connection will emerge. Connection based on reality rather than projection, consciousness rather than unconsciousness, truth rather than illusion. But these new connections require enough people to have survived the loneliness of awakening. Your aloneness is therefore not just personal, but collective. You're holding space for a form of human connection that doesn't yet exist widely, conscious relationship between individuated beings. Your willingness to endure isolation rather than accept false connection maintains the possibility of true meeting. Jung saw this as the hero's journey turned inward. The hero must leave the tribe, face the dragon alone, and return transformed. But the psychological hero must leave the collective unconscious, face the inner dragon of selfhood alone, and return as an individuated being. The loneliness is not the failure of the journey, it's proof you're on it. But Jung was honest. This loneliness can be unbearable. The human need for connection doesn't disappear with awakening, it intensifies. You don't stop needing others, you need them more consciously. The isolation isn't transcended, it's endured for the sake of truth. If you're experiencing the profound aloneness of awakening, if you see what others can't, exist in different meaning, feel energetically isolated, you're not failing at connection. You're succeeding at consciousness, and consciousness has a price that Jung understood deeply. Subscribe and hit the notification bell to join thousands who understand this spiritual loneliness. To dive even deeper into Jung's revolutionary psychology and what it means for your spiritual awakening, click the recommended video on your screen now.